Hi, Julie Jules, Cruise Companion. It's been 1 month since cruising has opened in Australia. There's been some highs and there's been some lows. Some people are a little more anxious now about travelling than before. Let's have a look at some of the things we can do to address our anxiety about cruising in Australia. With cruising in Australia starting in 2022, it has not necessarily been smooth sailing. So there is a worldwide pandemic still on, and there is still an active virus, especially here in Australia. So with Coral Princess testing that there was over 114 cases of COVID on board, it has to be kept in perspective that according to current media releases, that it was around 100 crew and about 14 passengers. So where does that leave us in our choice of risk assessment when we are wanting to go on a cruise? So this is the full disclosure. I am a registered nurse and I have studied psychology, but I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or registered medical officer. So everything I say in this video is going to be general in nature, and if you do suffer from any form of medical condition or a mental health problem, including anxiety, depression, etc., please go and get the support that you require that is going to assist you. So when cruising, there is going to be a risk all the time. There's going to be risks in life all of the time. Getting into a car, eating food if you've got an allergy, etc. Life is full of risks, and what we have to do is balance the risk with the negative outcome, the positive thing that we want to get from the activity and any negative outcome. What you have to be aware of is what your risk tolerance is, what level you are comfortable with, and if that increases to a point where you are showing physical signs of anxiety, palpitations, sweating, hyperventilation, lack of sleep, etc. So general concerns becoming into an anxious state where you deem the risk is too great, well then don't do the activity. Some people may be risk averse. Some people may want to avoid or risk altogether, so to avoid themselves any form of harm. Some of the general risks that happen when cruising could be getting seasick, getting diarrhea and vomiting with a norovirus, missing a port because you spend too long on a port. There are so many things that could be a risk-taking activity on a cruise. Risk of breaking your leg, risk of emptying your wallet or putting too much on the credit card. There are so many risks, but you have to be comfortable with whatever the level of risk is for you. But of course, when we are talking about risk, we also want to have a catch-all or something that's going to mitigate some of that risk, and that will be taking out travel insurance, for example, that could cover some of the losses that you could incur when cruising. One thing that has been highlighted in the news at the moment has been the fact that Coral Princess has had some COVID cases on it. Majority of them have been the crew and they have been in isolation, and then some have been passengers. So do we listen to what the media is saying, because they appear to be catastrophizing and being exceptionally what I would perceive as negative towards any form of infection. When there is infection within the community, within nursing homes, unfortunately, but there's not so much publicity or even a beat up about what is happening on the cruise ships. So what we have to remember is that when the virus first came 2 years ago, and there was the unfortunate events on Ruby Princess, where over 900 people got a virus and 28 people passed away. Things were different when the virus had first arrived. We didn't know how it was spread. We didn't have any vaccinations. We didn't know didn't have any of the protocols. We didn't know specifically what to do that could mitigate the spread. So the experience that happened on Ruby Princess, while very unfortunate, lessons have been learned, and we cannot just anchor ourselves back within that time frame. We've got to take in all of the perspective of what has been happening since then and where we can go in the future. So regardless of what your political beliefs were, I perceive as a registered nurse that the government did a reasonable job of taking in some strategies at the beginning of the virus where we isolated ourselves, we waited for a vaccine to become available, we then inoculated or vaccinated a large proportion of our population so that we could mitigate, when we did come in contact with a virus, that the outcome or the sickness or the level or degree of illness was not going to be so bad. We have focused on trying to mitigate any of the consequences when we do become exposed to the virus. So one of the underlying principles of having a vaccinated population was so that the body had an increased element of immunity. So when they did meet the virus, the symptoms didn't occur as bad and the whole process of the virus didn't last as long with some people, with most people. That was the ultimate goal. Whether that's been achieved or not, that's going to be something for the history books. But from our perspective as a human body coming in contact with a virus that we didn't know before, now that we've taken some time to get a vaccination, there is the higher probability that we will not get as sick, we will not get sick, we will not have the disease as long as we normally would have, and it might not have as negative consequences. So let's have a little chat about what the current risks of travelling on a cruise ship in Australia are. So we do have a risk of catching a virus, but we do have a risk of all the other things like noro, which is a virus, norovirus, but it has diarrhea and vomiting, different symptoms and etc. But we have the risk of testing positive, requiring quarantine. Does that quarantine have to happen out of state where then you've got out of pocket expense for quarantine? Can you get back to your home state and quarantine at home where there's not going to be as much financial cost? Is there a financial cost to you losing wage because you're in quarantine if you are self-employed, for example? What level you are comfortable with? And if that increases to a point where you are showing physical signs of anxiety, palpitations, sweating, hyperventilation, lack of sleep, etc. So general concerns becoming into an anxious state where you deem the risk is too great, well then don't do the activity. We have to balance out the negatives and the positives, and then we have to be comfortable with the level of risk, whether we're low risk, risk averse, so just will not run the risk of any of these negative things happening. A medium risk, yeah, it's going to be absolutely fine, and whatever comes along I will tolerate, I will accommodate. And then high risk. Doesn't matter what happens, I'm going, come hell or high water. Once you've made your decision, whichever one that is going to be, you are going to have to be happy with that decision that you made. You can't second guess yourself or live with regret. If you are a person that can't live with regret and it keeps mulling over in your head, oh, I should have, I would have, I could have, you need to be able to deal with that. So, of course, when we're talking about risk, we're talking about low risk, people that will wrap themselves in a bubble, keep themselves in cotton wool and do nothing. Then you've got the medium risk, which is where I would perceive myself, taking some risks but not other risks. You know, I won't go skydiving, but I would go driving in a fast car. A person who has a medium risk is maybe a person who would go to theme parks and do roller coasters, etc. And then people who do high risk, they would be the people who are going, you know, deep sea shark diving and skydiving, etc. So you have to decide which level of risk you are If when you are on your cruise and all you are thinking about is all the negative consequences, oh, I can't go to the show because I might get the virus. I don't want to do this because I don't want to risk catching the virus. Well, you're not going to enjoy the cruise. So maybe it is time for you to pull out, have an examination of your cruise insurance or your cancellation policies, etc. But if the cruising was very dangerous, the company would be offering, as they did with some of the Coral Princess cruises, people can have the option to cancel without negative consequences, getting their money back, getting cruise credits, etc. So there is a lot of flexibility within cruising at the moment because the industry wants to survive. Serial cruisers want cruising to survive. The government does not want that anything negative to happen to a travel industry that has such a great financial gain to large swathes of the population. So everybody is invested in making cruising work and working around any of the challenges that arise. Through your thinking and thought processes, you have to decide whether all the risks of potential negative outcomes are going to outweigh what joy and excitement and fun that you're going to have on a cruise ship. When you are deciding what your risks are when you are going to go on a cruise, you have to keep it in perspective. You have to look at the historical information, for example, of what has happened on Ruby Princess, and then you've got to have a look at what has happened overseas in Europe and America when they opened. It opened slowly, there were teething problems, there are still viruses on boats, but the industry has been going overseas for over a year now, so why can't that still happen in Australia? We're only into our first month. Let's not over-catastrophize with what is happening. We have anticipated that there is going to be small stumbling blocks, small roadblocks that we will get over once we encounter them. So as disclosed before, I am not a psychiatrist, psychologist, or medical officer. I am a registered nurse who has done a psychology degree and has done a lot of traveling. So if you perceive that you do want to cruise, but you see yourself as a low risk taker and then have a high probability of becoming anxious and concerned about traveling, maybe you should engage one of your health professionals, even to the point of a cognitive behavioural therapist, to assist you to work through some of your thought processes and decision making so that you would be comfortable with cruising. If not, hang 10. There's going to be 2023 and 2024. You work through your own challenges, and then when cruising is right for you, come back on board and enjoy such a wonderful experience on the open ocean. So hopefully you're able to do a risk analysis by writing down the negatives, writing down the positives, and being able to balance through those to find out how risk averse you are going to be and if cruising is right for you. Nothing in life is risk-free, but we have to be comfortable with the level of risk that we are taking, whether it be health, activities, financial. You have to be calm and comfortable within yourself to the level of risk that you're willing to take. So is cruising right for you? Work through that with yourself, with the people around you. But the other thing is, when you're talking to the people around you, don't just necessarily listen to the naysayers or the ones that are going to reinforce a lot of the negative stuff that you are thinking. Sometimes we surround ourselves with like-minded people and we may just need an opening of our mind to other ideas. Just a thought. This is Julie Jules, Cruise Companion, saying stay safe everybody and happy travels.